I'd spent 43 years making myself smaller so everyone else could feel bigger. Last night, my wife told me I wasn't needed. Right there in the hotel lobby, loud enough for strangers to hear. After I'd paid for every room, every meal, every moment of this trip they were enjoying without me. They'd laughed at my stories, mocked my age, walked past me like I didn't exist, and assumed I'd keep paying for the privilege of being erased. In 3 hours, they'd wake up to a very different world, one where the invisible man finally stopped apologizing for taking up space. Before we continue, I want to thank you for being here. If you believe that respect should be earned through character, not demanded through obligation, please consider subscribing. It helps more people discover stories about reclaiming your dignity. Now, let's see what David had planned for that Sunday morning. I canceled 6 hotel rooms at 2:47 in the morning while my family slept upstairs. The lobby was quiet except for the hum of the air conditioning and the occasional clink of ice in my glass. I'd been sitting in the same leather armchair for 4 hours, nursing whiskey and watching the clock above the reception desk tick its way toward dawn. The night clerk had gone on break. The bartender was wiping down glasses with the methodical rhythm of someone who'd seen everything and was surprised by nothing. They'd left me there at 10:30 the previous evening, walked right past me like I was part of the furniture. 6 people. My wife, my stepson, my daughter and her boyfriend, my son, and my brother-in-law. Not one of them looked back. I'd watched them disappear into the restaurant, heard the burst of laughter as the hostess seated them, and sat there on that sofa for 20 minutes before I realized my hands were shaking. Funny how invisibility works. You spend 43 years making sure everyone's comfortable, picking up every check, smoothing over every conflict, and the moment you hesitate, the moment you suggest that maybe, just once, someone else could make a decision, you become a ghost. I'd paid for every room. Every single one. 5-star beachfront resort in Hilton Head, ocean views, spa packages, the works. Charged it all to my card because that's what I did. That's what I'd always done. The front desk clerk had been very understanding when I'd approached him an hour earlier. Almost too understanding. He'd pulled up the reservations without a word, looked at my face, then looked at the screen, and said, "Mr. Peterson, these are all under your name and credit card. You have every right to modify them." I'd nodded. My throat was too tight to speak. "The other guests," he'd continued carefully, "are they aware you're making changes?" "They're asleep," I'd said. "They won't be aware until housekeeping knocks at 6. He'd studied me for a long moment. Then he'd clicked through the screens, and 5 reservations had vanished. Just like that. Confirmation numbers deleted. Room keys deactivated. The computer didn't ask why. It didn't require an explanation or demand proof of betrayal. It simply asked, "Are you sure?" I'd been sure. Now I was back in my chair, watching the clock. 3:15. In 2 hours and 45 minutes, housekeeping would begin their rounds. They'd knock on doors where my family was sleeping off expensive wine and self-satisfaction. They'd announce that checkout time had arrived. And my wife, who couldn't function without her industrial-strength earplugs and blackout sleep mask, would wake up to a world that had shifted beneath her. The bartender approached with the bottle. "Another?" "Why not?" I said. "I'm not going anywhere." He poured 2 fingers of whiskey into my glass. "Rough night. Getting better." He smiled slightly, like he understood something I hadn't said, and returned to his post. I checked my phone. No messages. No one wondering where I was or whether I'd eaten dinner. I'd sat in that lobby for 4 hours, and not one of them had noticed I wasn't in my room. Not one of them had texted to ask if I was all right. I opened my email and looked at the confirmation receipts still sitting in my inbox. Evidence of a family vacation I'd orchestrated and funded. Evidence of a life I'd built on the assumption that generosity equaled love. The clock read 3:47. In 2 hours and 13 minutes, my wife would discover exactly how much she didn't need me. I finished my drink and ordered another. I should probably explain how I ended up in a 5-star hotel lobby at 4 in the morning, contemplating the destruction of my own family vacation. My name is David Peterson. I'm 68 years old, retired mechanical engineer, formerly of Phoenix, Arizona. I say formerly because I'd sold the house there 3 years ago when Linda, my second wife, decided she wanted something more manageable in Scottsdale. What she'd meant was something closer to her son Marcus and his tech startup friends. What I'd heard was that my 4-bedroom ranch with the workshop in the garage was no longer fashionable. I'd married Linda 15 years earlier, 3 years after my first wife, Sarah, died of ovarian cancer. Sarah and I had been together since college. She'd been the kind of woman who called people on their nonsense, who laughed at my engineering jokes, who made me feel like competence was attractive. When she died, I thought the loneliness would kill me. Linda had seemed like a second chance. She was warm, attentive, interested in my stories. She'd told me she wasn't good with numbers and asked if I'd mind handling the finances. I hadn't minded. I'd handled finances for 40 years. I was good at it. It felt like contributing. What I'd failed to notice was that handling finances would eventually mean paying for everything while being consulted on nothing. We had what you'd call a blended family, though blended suggests a smoothness that never quite materialized. I had 2 adult children from my first marriage, Jeff, 42, and Emily, 39. Linda had Marcus, 36, from her first marriage. My kids were polite but distant. They'd loved their mother and tolerated their father's remarriage with the grim courtesy of people attending a funeral. Marcus, on the other hand, had embraced me with the enthusiasm of someone who discovered an unlocked ATM. Sunday dinners at our Scottsdale house had become a weekly exercise in feeling like a stranger at my own table. I'd cook. Linda said she didn't have the energy anymore, and they'd arrive with opinions about everything except the meal. The wine wasn't the right vintage. The roast was overdone. Had I considered that red meat was killing the planet? I'd become the ATM with a pulse. The realization had arrived slowly. The way you notice you're aging. One morning you look in the mirror and wonder when your father's face replaced yours. The Hilton Head trip had been Linda's idea. We'd been sitting in the living room on a Tuesday evening in March. I was reading a biography of Eisenhower. Linda was scrolling through her phone, something she did with the focused intensity of a surgeon. "We should do a family reunion," she'd said suddenly. I'd looked up from my book. "Eh, what?" "A trip. All of us. Somewhere nice. The kids never see each other." The kids saw each other every Sunday at my house, but I kept that observation to myself. "Where were you thinking?" I'd asked. "I don't know. Somewhere beachy. Relaxing." She'd continued scrolling, then stopped. "Hilton Head. Didn't you go there as a kid?" I had. My parents had rented a cottage there for 2 weeks every summer when I was young. I remembered the beach, the salt air, the feeling that the world was bigger and kinder than it actually was. I'd loved it. "I did," I'd said carefully. "Perfect. Book something nice. Let's do it in May." And that had been that. A decision made, a location chosen, an instruction delivered. I tried to feel grateful that she'd remembered something about my childhood. Mostly I'd felt like I'd been given an assignment. I'd spent the next week researching resorts, comparing prices, reading reviews. I'd found a 5-star property right on the beach, individual cottages, spa, for restaurants, the kind of place that cost more per night than my first car. I'd booked 6 rooms, 1 for Linda and me, 1 for Jeff, 1 for Emily and her boyfriend Tyler, 1 for Marcus, 1 for my brother-in-law Greg and his wife Susan. 5 nights. Ocean views for everyone. The total had made me wince, but I told myself it was an investment. Quality time. Memory making. All the things the internet promised would fix a family that had forgotten how to look at each other. I'd kept all the confirmation emails in a folder labeled Hilton Head Trip, organized by date, with a spreadsheet tracking costs. Old engineering habits die hard. The hotel manager, as it turned out, was Robert Chun, except I'd discovered at the last minute that his name wasn't Chun at all. It was Robert Mitchell, an old fraternity brother from my days at the University of Virginia. We'd reconnected via email during the booking process. He'd written, "Dave Peterson? Sigma Chi 78? No kidding. I'll make sure you're taken care of." I'd appreciated that. It felt like evidence that I'd once been a person people remembered fondly. Linda's reaction to the booking confirmation had been less enthusiastic. "You're spending too much," she'd said, scrolling through the PDF I'd forwarded her. "It's a special occasion," I'd replied. "It's excessive. We could have gone somewhere normal." Normal meant cheap. I'd understood the translation. "I wanted it to be nice," I'd said. She'd sighed, a long-suffering sound that suggested I was being difficult, and returned to her phone. I'd kept the thought to myself that I was spending my money, not hers. The money I'd saved over 45 years of working 60-hour weeks. The money from the pension and the retirement accounts and the sale of the Phoenix house. My money. But pointing that out would have made me petty, and I'd spent a lifetime trying not to be petty. 2 weeks before the trip, We'd had a family dinner to discuss logistics. Everyone had come, unusual in itself, which should have been my first warning. Linda had made a salad. I'd grilled steaks. Marcus had arrived late and hadn't apologized. So, Hilton Head, Jeff had said, cutting into his ribeye. Nice choice, Dad. Your father went there as a child, Linda had said, in the tone of someone explaining a minor eccentricity. Boomer nostalgia trip, Marcus had muttered into his wine glass. Linda had laughed. An actual laugh, like he'd said something clever. I'd focused on my plate. Emily's boyfriend Tyler, a cryptocurrency enthusiast with opinions about everything, had leaned back in his chair. At least someone's finally treating Linda right. Last vacation she told me about sounded like a Motel 6 situation. That had been the trip with her first husband, 20 years ago, but Tyler had delivered the line like he was defending her honor. Guess the old man's credit card still works, he'd added, grinning. Emily had touched his arm. Tyler. What? I'm joking. Dave knows I'm joking. I'd known he wasn't joking. I'd also known that pointing it out would make me the problem. Flight times? I'd asked, changing the subject. Jeff had pulled out his phone. Emily and I are on the same flight back Sunday morning. 6 a.m. shuttle from the hotel. That's brutal, Linda had said. It was the only option that didn't cost a fortune, Jeff had replied, glancing at me. Didn't want to overdo it. The implication being that I'd already overdone it, but at least my children had the decency to feel guilty. Marcus, what about you? Linda had asked. I'll figure it out, he'd said. I'm flexible. Flexible meant he hadn't booked anything, which meant I'd probably end up changing his flight last minute at triple the cost. The conversation had drifted to other topics. Susan had mentioned that the resort had a spa. Greg had clapped me on the shoulder and said, Thanks for the free vacation, champ. Free. As if 43 years of work, of mortgage payments and college tuitions and carefully managed investments, were monopoly money I'd printed in my basement. I'd smiled and said, happy to do it. Linda had mentioned her sleep requirements. Earplugs, blackout mask, white noise machine. I can't function without perfect sleep, she'd said. Everyone needs to be quiet in the mornings. I'd made a mental note. Linda's sleep was sacred. The rest of us could manage on caffeine and willpower. Before dessert, the hotel had called to confirm details. I'd stepped into the kitchen to take it. Mr. Peterson, this is the concierge at Palmetto Dunes Resort. Just confirming your party of 7. Checking in Friday, May 12th. Checking out Sunday, May 14th. Checkout time is 11 a.m. sharp. No exceptions, as we have a full booking that weekend. Understood, I'd said. And your friend Mr. Mitchell asked me to let you know he's looking forward to seeing you. Likewise. I'd returned to the table feeling slightly better. At least Robert remembered me. The flight to South Carolina had been fine, if you defined fine as no one sat next to me. Linda had taken a window seat 3 rows up. Marcus had commandeered the emergency exit row. Jeff and Emily had sat together, and I caught them whispering, glancing back at me once. I pretended not to notice. Tyler had spent the flight listening to a podcast at volume levels that suggested he believed headphones were decorative. We'd landed in Charleston and driven an hour to Hilton Head. The resort was stunning. White buildings, palm trees, ocean stretching to the horizon. I'd felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this would work. Maybe in a beautiful place, away from routines and resentments, we'd remember how to be a family. I'd handled check-in while everyone else explored the grounds. The lobby was all marble and fresh flowers, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the beach. I'd noticed the security cameras, small, discreet, positioned at every entrance and above the front desk. Robert had appeared while I was signing paperwork. Dave Peterson, he'd said, extending his hand. Still got that terrible handwriting, I see. We'd shaken hands. He looked good, trim, silver-haired, the kind of aging that suggested expensive personal trainers. Robert, good to see you. You too. Listen, anything you need, you let me know. I mean it. I'd thanked him, collected the key cards, and turned to find my family waiting by the elevators. Greg had clapped me on the shoulder again. Thanks for the free vacation, champ. I'd handed out the keys and watched them disappear into their rooms. Standing alone in that beautiful lobby, I'd felt the first whisper of something I didn't want to name. I'd felt unnecessary. The first night's dinner should have been a warning. We'd agreed to meet at 7 at the resort's main restaurant, a place called The Tides, all white linens and candlelight and prices that required you to sit down before reading the menu. I'd arrived 5 minutes early, was shown to our table, and spent 20 minutes alone with a basket of bread before anyone else appeared. Linda arrived first, already irritated. They sat us in the back, she said, surveying the table like it had personally offended her. It's a nice table, I said. Ocean view. It's by the kitchen. It wasn't. But arguing seemed pointless. The others trickled in over the next 10 minutes. Marcus wore a wrinkled linen shirt that probably cost $300. Tyler had apparently decided flip-flops were appropriate for fine dining. Emily looked tired. Jeff looked uncomfortable. Greg and Susan were the last to arrive, smelling like hotel bar. Started without us, did you? Greg said, eyeing my water glass like I'd committed a crime. Just water, I said. Let's fix that. He flagged down the waiter. Bottle of your best Cabernet. No, make it two. We're celebrating. The waiter had glanced at me. I nodded, because what else was I going to do? Linda ordered without looking at the menu. She'd apparently researched the restaurant in advance, and went straight for the most expensive items. Oysters to start. Dover sole for the main. The waiter hadn't asked if anyone else wanted to share appetizers. Linda had a way of making her preferences sound like group decisions. I tried to engage people in conversation. Asked Jeff about his work. Asked Emily about her garden. Got polite, monosyllabic answers, and the distinct impression I was interrupting more important thoughts. Dad, Emily had said at one point, and I'd felt a small surge of hope. Could you pass the bread? I'd pass the bread. Marcus had been deep in conversation with Linda about someone named Christoph who was revolutionizing the fintech space, which apparently meant he'd created an app that helped people spend money they didn't have. I'd mentioned that I'd come to Hilton Head as a kid, thinking maybe it would spark something. A question. A memory. Interest. Marcus had looked up from his phone. Boomer nostalgia hour. Perfect timing. Linda had laughed. Actually laughed. I'd picked up my wine glass and discovered it was empty. The check had arrived after dessert. A dessert I hadn't ordered, but had apparently been included in Linda's tasting menu decision. Greg had snatched it from the waiter's hand before it reached the table. Jesus, Linda, he'd said, whistling. You trying to bankrupt him? He offered. Linda had said, not looking at me. He always offers. As if generosity were a character flaw. As if paying for my own wife's dinner required an apology. I'd reach for the check. Greg had handed it over with a smirk. Big spender, Tyler had muttered. I'd placed my card in the folder without looking at the total. I'd like to finish my coffee, I'd said. We're going to the beach bonfire, Tyler had announced, standing up. They've got a fire pit and Esmores. You coming, old-timer? The question had been rhetorical. He was already walking away. One by one, they'd left the table. Linda had kissed me on the cheek, a dry, obligatory gesture, and followed Marcus. Emily had hesitated, then trailed after Tyler. Jeff had been the last to leave. Thanks for dinner, Dad, he'd said. Of course. He'd looked like he wanted to say something else. Instead, he'd nodded and walked away. I'd sat alone at that table for 20 minutes, drinking cold coffee and wondering when I'd become the kind of person people thanked out of obligation rather than affection. The next afternoon had been worse. I'd spent the morning walking the beach alone, then returned to the room to find Linda getting ready for something. There you are, she'd said. We're taking photos on the South Beach. The lighting is supposed to be perfect. Great, I'd said. Give me 5 minutes to change. We already went. I'd stopped halfway to the closet. What? This morning. Around 10. You were gone. I was walking. You could have texted. I didn't know where you were. She'd said it like it was my fault, like I'd deliberately made myself unavailable. We're all here together, I'd said. I thought that was the point. The point is to relax, David. Not to schedule every minute. I'd felt the anger then, a hot, tight feeling in my chest that I'd spent 15 years learning to suppress. I paid for this trip so we could spend time together, I'd said quietly. She'd turned from the mirror, mascara wand in hand. You paid to control us. That's all you ever do. The words had landed like a slap. Control you? Yes. Control. You pick the restaurant. You pick the hotel. You decide what's worth spending money on and what isn't. You never ask what anyone else wants. I asked about Hilton Head. You suggested it. And you ran with it. Booked everything without even showing me options. You told me to book it. My voice had been louder than I'd intended. A couple walking past our door had glanced over. Linda had lowered her voice to a venomous whisper. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You don't listen. You just do what you want and expect everyone to be grateful. I'd stood there, speechless, while she finished her makeup. "We're having dinner at 6, she'd said. "Without you, if you're going to be like this." "Like what?" "Sulking." She'd left. I'd stood in the empty room, staring at my reflection in the mirror, and wondered if I'd gone insane. If I'd somehow misunderstood the fundamental nature of reality. I'd gone down to the lobby because I couldn't stand the room anymore. I'd chosen a leather sofa near the windows, away from the front desk, and sat down with no plan beyond not being alone in a hotel room I'd paid $700 a night for. Marcus had appeared first, on his way to the restaurant. He'd seen me and stopped. "You're not coming to dinner?" "I wasn't invited," I'd said. He'd laughed, an ugly sound. "Mom's right. You think money fixes everything." "I don't." But he'd already walked away. One by one, they passed me. Greg and Susan, arm in arm. Jeff, looking at his phone. Emily and Tyler, whispering about something. Linda had been last. She'd stopped directly in front of me. "We don't need you here anyway," she'd said. Clear. Deliberate. Loud enough that the concierge had looked over. "Go sulk in your room." "I think I'll stay in the lobby," I'd said. "Fine. We're going to dinner. Don't wait up." She'd walked away. All 6 of them. Past me like I was furniture. Like I was the strange old man who sat in hotel lobbies for no reason. Not one of them had looked back. I'd sat on that sofa for 20 minutes, watching the sun set through the windows, feeling my hands shake with something I couldn't name. Rage. Humiliation. Grief. Eventually, I'd walked to the hotel bar and taken a seat at the far end, away from the other guests. The bartender, a young guy with a neat beard and kind eyes, had approached with a towel over his shoulder. "What can I get you?" "Whiskey," I'd said. "Neat." He'd poured it without comment, set it down, and moved away. I'd sat there for a long time, staring at the amber liquid, trying to understand how I'd arrived at this moment. 68 years old. Retired. Financially comfortable. Sitting alone in a bar while my family ate dinner 50 yards away. The bartender had returned after a while. "Another?" "Sure." He'd poured. "Big family reunion?" "Something like that." "How's it going?" I'd looked at him. Really looked. He couldn't have been more than 30. Probably thought I was just another lonely old man with too much money and not enough sense. "Getting smaller by the minute," I'd said. He'd smiled slightly, like he understood something I hadn't meant to say, and left me alone. I'd pulled out my phone and opened my email. The folder was still there. Hilton Head trip. 12 confirmation emails. 6 room reservations, all paid in full, all under my name and credit card. I'd stared at them for a long time. Through the restaurant windows, I could see my family. Laughing. Toasting. Marcus was telling a story, his hands animated, his face bright. Linda was smiling at him the way she used to smile at me, back when I'd been new and interesting instead of reliable and convenient. Emily saw me through the window. Our eyes met for just a moment. She'd looked away. I'd closed my email and opened it again. The confirmation numbers were all there. Every single one. I'd finished my drink and ordered another, and I'd sat there until they'd finished dinner and walked past me again, this time heading toward the elevators. Not one of them had stopped. Linda had yawned. Marcus had checked his phone. Tyler had his arm around Emily. They'd disappeared into the elevators, and I'd been alone in the lobby with my whiskey and a question I couldn't stop asking. What exactly was I paying for? I'd gone back to my room around 11, though gone back suggested I had somewhere else to be. The room was dark and quiet. Linda's side of the bed was still made. She was probably holding court in Marcus's room, or Greg's, discussing my many failures as a husband and human being. I'd sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall. 43 years. 2 marriages. 3 children who couldn't be bothered to look me in the eye when they walked past me. The first marriage had been different. Sarah had seen me. Actually seen me. Not as a provider or a problem solver, but as a person. We'd met in an engineering ethics class at UVA, both of us idealistic 20-year-olds who thought we could design a better world. She'd argued that engineers had a moral obligation to consider social impact. I'd argued that efficiency was its own morality. We debated for 3 hours in the library and gotten coffee afterward. We'd been married 41 years when she died. I'd held her hand in the hospice room in Phoenix while she told me to find someone else, to not be alone, to remember that I deserved to be happy. She'd been so certain, so sure that the world would continue to make sense without her in it. I believed her. Linda had seemed like proof that Sarah was right. She'd been warm, attentive, interested in my stories about work and travel and the cabin Sarah and I had built in the mountains north of Sedona. The cabin with the red rocks visible from the porch, where Sarah and I had spent weekends hiking and reading and remembering why we'd liked each other in the first place. I thought Linda understood what that place meant to me. Now I wondered if she'd just been cataloging assets. I stood up and walked to the desk, opened my laptop, and navigated to the folder where I kept important documents. The prenup was there, 7 pages of legalese that my lawyer Alan had insisted on before the wedding. "You're a widower with assets," Alan had said. "You need to protect yourself." I'd felt gross even discussing it. Like I was planning for failure before I'd given the marriage a chance. But I'd signed it. And Linda had signed it. And the Arizona cabin, the one Sarah and I had built together, the one with both our names on the original deed until her death transferred full ownership to me, remained solely mine. I pulled up the property deed. There it was, black and white. David Charles Peterson, sole owner. I'd protected the cabin. I hadn't protected myself. The thought arrived with uncomfortable clarity. I'd spent 15 years guarding a building and ignoring the fact that I was living with someone who saw me as a malfunctioning appliance. I checked my phone. No messages from Linda. No one asking where I was, or if I'd eaten dinner, or if I was okay. I opened a text to Alan. "Need to talk Monday. Estate planning." His reply came immediately. "Despite the late hour, everything okay?" I stared at the question. Was everything okay? I was sitting alone in a hotel room I'd paid for, having been publicly dismissed by my wife, after funding a vacation for people who treated me like an inconvenience. Getting clearer, I typed back. "I'll clear my calendar. Call anytime." I set the phone down and closed the laptop. Sleep seemed unlikely. I changed into jeans and a shirt and went back down to the lobby. It was after midnight. The space had transformed. Lights dimmed, furniture casting long shadows, the ocean visible through the windows as a black expanse dotted with stars. A different person stood behind the front desk, younger than the day clerk, reading something on a tablet. I walked past him toward the bar, but it had closed. The chairs were upturned on tables. The bottles gleamed in the low light like a museum exhibit. I stood there for a moment, unsure what I was even looking for. "Mr. Peterson?" I turned. The night manager was watching me, concerned. "Everything all right, sir?" "Fine," I said automatically. Then, because that was obviously a lie, couldn't sleep. He nodded, the way people do when they're trained to accept whatever story you're selling. "Could I ask you something?" I said. "Of course." "The security footage. From the lobby. How long do you keep it?" His expression shifted, still polite, but wary now. "We maintain records for 30 days. Is there a problem?" "No problem. I stopped. How did you explain this without sounding insane?" "This afternoon, around 4 o'clock. Could I review that footage?" "Sir, I'm not sure I can. I paid for 6 rooms in this hotel," I said quietly. "I'd like to confirm something." He studied me for a long moment. I could see him weighing liability against customer service, policy against the fact that I clearly wasn't a threat to anyone except possibly myself. "Let me check with my supervisor," he said. He made a phone call, spoke in low tones, then hung up. "If you'll come with me." He led me to a small office behind the front desk. 2 monitors showed live feeds from various cameras around the property. He clicked through a menu, pulled up archived footage, and navigated to the lobby camera from earlier that day. "What time?" 4:15, I said. "Maybe 4:20. He scrolled through. The footage was surprisingly clear, high definition, probably updated recently. I watched myself appear on screen, walking into the lobby, choosing the sofa near the windows. "There," I said. "Can you play it forward from there?" He clicked play. I watched myself sit down. Watched myself check my phone. Watched the minutes tick by and the timestamp at the corner of the screen. At 4:47, Linda appeared. She walked directly toward me, stopped in front of the sofa. I couldn't hear the audio, but I could read her body language. Arms crossed, head tilted in that way she had when she was explaining why I was wrong. The conversation lasted 90 seconds. Then Marcus appeared. Then the others. I watched them gather. Watched Linda gesture toward the restaurant. Watched all 6 of them walk away. Not one of them looked back at the sofa where I sat. The camera angle was perfect. There was no ambiguity. No question of perspective or interpretation. They'd walked past me like I wasn't there. "Is that what you needed to see?" the manager asked quietly. "Yes," I said. My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. "Could I get a copy of that?" "Sir." Please. He hesitated, then nodded. I'll need to check with my supervisor in the morning. We don't usually. I understand. Thank you. I walked back to the lobby. The clock above the front desk read 12:47 a.m. I sat back down on the same sofa and pulled out my phone. The anger had crystallized into something colder, something more useful. I opened my notes app and started writing. 6 rooms. All in my name. Checkout. 11 a.m. Sunday. Their flight. 6 a.m. shuttle Sunday. Current time. 12:47 a.m. Saturday night. Jeff had mentioned the flight timing at dinner back in Scottsdale. 6 a.m. shuttle meant they'd need to be in the lobby by 5:30 at the latest, which meant they'd be up and moving by 5, which meant if something were to happen to their rooms in the middle of the night, they'd discover it right before they needed to leave for the airport. The timing was almost elegant. I thought about Linda's earplugs, her blackout mask, her absolute requirement for perfect sleep. She wouldn't hear housekeeping knock. She'd wake up confused and disoriented and unprepared. I thought about the concierge's words. Checkout is 11 a.m. sharp. No exceptions. I thought about Marcus's sneer. Tyler's old man's credit card comment. Greg's free vacation. Linda's voice. We don't need you here anyway. I opened my email and found Robert's personal cell number from our earlier exchange about the booking. My thumb hovered over the screen. This was scorched earth. This was burning bridges I couldn't rebuild. This was the kind of decision you couldn't walk back from. I thought about the security footage. The 6 of them walking away. I sent the text. Robert, it's Dave Peterson. Are you still on property? Need a favor. The reply came within seconds. In my office. Come by. I stood up and walked toward the administrative wing. Robert's office was tucked behind the main lobby, down a corridor marked staff only. The door was open. He was sitting behind a desk covered in paperwork, still wearing his suit from earlier despite the hour. Dave, he said, standing. Come in. Close the door. I did. Fraternity brothers don't text at 2 a.m. unless it's serious, he said. It's serious. He gestured to a chair. I sat. What happened? I told him. Not everything. I wasn't looking for sympathy, but enough. The dinner. The abandoned photo shoot. The confrontation in the lobby. Linda's parting words. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. I saw them at dinner, he said finally. Saw you in the lobby after. And I wondered why a man would book 6 rooms and then sit alone in my lobby on a Saturday night. Now you know. He leaned back in his chair. What do you need, Dave? I want to cancel 5 rooms. Keep mine. Effective immediately. His expression didn't change. They're all under your card? Every one. You understand what you're asking. I do. Checkout's at 11. Housekeeping starts knocking at 6. I know. He pulled his keyboard closer, typed something, studied the screen. You paid in full. Cancellation this late. You won't get refunds. I know. They'll be escorted out by security if they can't produce valid room keys. I'm counting on it. He looked at me for a long moment. This is nuclear, Dave. Yes. You're sure? I thought about 43 years of being reliable. Of being the person who paid and planned and smoothed things over. Of being invisible until someone needed something. I'm sure. He turned back to his computer. His fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. Marcus Peterson. Cancelled. Emily Peterson and guest. Cancelled. Jeffrey Peterson. Cancelled. Gregory and Susan Hartwell. Cancelled. Linda Peterson. Cancelled. He hit a final key. Done. Reservation confirmations have been revoked. Room keys will deactivate within 5 minutes. The finality of it hit me like cold water. What happens in the morning? I asked. Housekeeping will knock at 6. They'll announce checkout. Your family will try their keys. The keys won't work. They'll come to the front desk. We'll inform them their reservations were canceled by the cardholder. You. And they'll need to vacate immediately. Can they rebook? He checked his screen. We're fully booked. Wedding party checked in this afternoon. 200 guests. We don't have a single room available. Something that felt suspiciously like cosmic justice settled in my chest. Nearest hotel with availability is probably 20 miles inland, Robert continued. And at 6 a.m. on a Sunday, they won't have much time before their flight. No, I said. They won't. He printed something. 5 pages that came out of the printer with mechanical precision. Cancellation receipts, he said, handing them to me. Paper trail. You'll want these. I took them. The pages were still warm. Thank you, I said. Don't thank me yet. You know there's going to be fallout. I know. Your wife. We'll call her lawyer on Monday. I'll call mine. He nodded slowly. She really said you weren't needed? Verbatim. Then she won't need the room. We sat in silence for a moment. You want a drink? Robert asked. I've had enough whiskey. Coffee then. He poured 2 cups from a machine in the corner. Handed me one. We drank without talking. What are you going to do? He asked eventually. Sit in the lobby, I said. Watch it happen. That's cold, Dave. You should have seen the security footage. He grimaced. I don't need to. I saw your face when you walked in here. I checked my watch. 2:51 a.m. In 3 hours and 9 minutes, housekeeping would start their rounds. In 3 hours and 9 minutes, my wife would wake up to a world that had shifted beneath her. I stood up. I should go. Dave, Robert said. For what it's worth, I've been doing this job for 15 years. I've seen a lot of families come through here. Yours treated you like staff. I let them. Maybe. But not anymore. I walked back to the lobby and sat down in my chair. The same leather chair I'd been sitting in when they'd walked past me. I pulled out my phone and looked at the cancellation receipts Robert had given me. 5 rooms. Gone. Just like that. The bartender from earlier appeared, somehow still on shift, carrying a pot of coffee. Thought you might need this, he said, pouring me a cup without asking. Thanks. Long night. About to get longer. He smiled slightly and walked away. I drank the coffee and watched the clock. 3:47 a.m. In 2 hours and 13 minutes, my wife would discover exactly how much she didn't need me. I pulled out my phone one more time and opened the text thread with Alan. Monday meeting still on, I typed. Adding divorce to the agenda. His reply came immediately. Understood. I'll prep the paperwork. I set the phone down and finished my coffee. The lobby was silent except for the hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of waves against the shore. I ordered another cup and waited for dawn. The sky outside began to lighten around 5:30. Not sunrise yet, but that gray pre-dawn glow that made everything look washed out and temporary. I'd been sitting in the lobby for 3 hours, watching the clock tick toward the moment when my family's world would tilt sideways. I felt remarkably calm. Robert appeared from his office at 5:47, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed me one and sat in the chair across from mine. Still time to reverse it, he said quietly. I know. And I'm not going to. He nodded. We drank our coffee in silence. At 5:55, the housekeeping supervisor arrived for her shift, a woman in her 50s with efficient movements and kind eyes. She spoke briefly with Robert, glanced at a tablet, then disappeared down the corridor toward the service elevators. She knows? I asked. I briefed her, Robert said. Professional courtesy. She'll handle it diplomatically. Diplomatically. As if there was a diplomatic way to tell 6 people they no longer had rooms because the man they'd spent 2 days ignoring had canceled their reservations in the middle of the night. At 6:02, I heard the first knock. It was distant, somewhere on the 3rd floor, where Marcus had his room. I couldn't hear the words, but I heard the rhythm of it. Knock, knock, knock. Pause. Knock, knock, knock. Robert's radio crackled. A voice. Guest in 314 says there's been a mistake. Key card not working. Robert picked up the radio. No mistake. Reservation was canceled early this morning. Please ask the guest to vacate and come to the front desk. A pause. Copy that. Marcus appeared in the lobby 7 minutes later, wearing gym shorts and a t-shirt, hair standing up in odd directions. He looked like he'd been woken from deep sleep and wasn't quite convinced he was awake. He saw me in the chair and stopped. Did you do this? He said. I sipped my coffee. Good morning to you too. My key doesn't work. They're saying my reservation was canceled. That's correct. His face went through several expressions: confusion, disbelief, and finally anger. You canceled my room? I canceled my reservation. The room was in my name. This is insane. You can't just. I can't actually. Robert confirmed it's all by the book. I gestured to Robert, who was standing by the front desk with the expression of someone who'd seen this conversation coming. Marcus turned to him. This is illegal. It's not, sir, Robert said calmly. The reservation was made and paid for by Mr. Peterson. He's within his rights to modify it. His wife is in one of those rooms. Actually, Robert said, checking his tablet, Mrs. Peterson's room was also under Mr. Peterson's name and credit card. That reservation has been canceled as well. Marcus stared at him. You're joking. I'm not. At 6:15, the radio crackled again. Guest in 308 requesting manager. Says there's been a mistake. That would be Greg and Susan. At 6:18, guest in 311 very upset, asking about rebooking. Jeff. At 6:22, guest in 309 demanding to speak to corporate. Emily and Tyler. Marcus was still standing in front of me, apparently frozen in disbelief. Where are we supposed to go? He said. That's not my problem anymore. You're doing this because of what Mom said. Your mother said I wasn't needed. I'm giving her what she asked for. She didn't mean. She meant it. So did you. So did all of you. Greg appeared then, red-faced, and already shouting before he'd crossed the lobby. What the hell is this, David? I stood up. Seemed polite, somehow, to stand for my own execution. Good morning, Greg. Don't good morning me. They're kicking us out of our room. I canceled the reservation. You what? I canceled my reservations. All of them. You can't do that. We have a flight. I checked my watch. In 43 minutes. You should probably call that shuttle. Susan appeared behind him, wrapped in a hotel robe, her face pale. David, please. This is crazy. No, I said quietly. What's crazy is spending 2 days watching 6 people treat me like I'm invisible and then expecting me to keep paying for the privilege. Jeff arrived next, dressed but disheveled, his expression somewhere between mortified and furious. Dad, he said, what are you doing? What I should have done yesterday. This isn't, you can't just. Emily and Tyler were last. Emily looked like she'd been crying. Tyler looked like he wanted to hit someone. You're a psycho, old man, Tyler said. I turned to him slowly. You made a joke about my credit card at dinner 2 weeks ago. Remember? Guess the old man's credit card still works. Turns out it does. Just not for you. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Linda appeared at the top of the stairs. She was still wearing her eye mask pushed up on her forehead, earplugs dangling from her fingers. No makeup. Hair wild. She looked disoriented and small in a way I'd never seen her look before. She saw me and stopped. David. Linda. What's happening? Someone was banging on my door. The housekeeper said. She stopped, taking in the scene. Her son. My children. Greg and Susan. All of them clustered in the lobby looking at me with varying degrees of shock and rage. What did you do? She asked quietly. I canceled the reservations. Which reservations? All of them. Except mine. The words landed like stones in still water. I watched the ripples spread across her face. You canceled our rooms? My rooms, I corrected. In my name. On my credit card. I canceled my reservations. That's, she looked around, as if someone else could explain this. As if there was another version of reality where this made sense. That's our luggage up there. Our things. Housekeeping will bring everything down, Robert said from the desk. Standard procedure for early checkout. We didn't check out. Linda's voice was rising now, losing the careful control she usually maintained in public. This is insane. David, you're having some kind of breakdown. I'm fine, actually. You're not fine. You're sabotaging a family vacation because you're upset about what? Dinner. I'm upset, I said, keeping my voice level. Because you walked past me yesterday and said you didn't need me. Because you left me sitting in a lobby for 4 hours and didn't send a single text. Because I paid for 6 rooms and 5 spa packages and every meal, and all I asked for was basic courtesy. So you threw a tantrum? I made a business decision. Marcus stepped forward. This is abuse. Financial abuse. I looked at him. Really looked at him. 26 years old, working for a startup funded by his mother's friends. Living in an apartment I'd helped furnish when he'd moved to Scottsdale. You're right, I said. I was being financially abused. I'm correcting that now. The front desk clerk approached hesitantly, carrying a clipboard. Mr. Peterson? The shuttle company called. Your 6 a.m. shuttle is here. Everyone turned to look at the front entrance. Through the glass doors, I could see a white van idling in the circular drive. That's our flight, Jeff said. Better not miss it, I said. Where are we supposed to go? Emily asked. Her voice was small, defeated. Our stuff is upstairs. We can't. Housekeeping is bringing it down, Robert repeated. We'll have everything in the lobby within 5 minutes. And then what? Greg demanded. We're just supposed to stand in the lobby with our suitcases. You're supposed to leave, Robert said. His voice was still polite, but there was steel underneath now. Your reservations have been canceled. You're no longer registered guests. Linda turned to him. Can we rebook? He shook his head. We're fully booked. Wedding party. 200 guests. I don't have a single room available. Nearest hotel? Jeff asked. 20 miles inland. But at this hour on a Sunday. We'll miss our flight, Emily finished. Housekeeping arrived then, pushing carts laden with luggage. 6 suitcases, various carry-ons, toiletry bags, the detritus of a family vacation. They arranged everything in a neat row near the entrance. Marcus grabbed his bag. I can't believe you're doing this. I can't believe it took me this long, I said. He left, just grabbed his stuff and walked out to the shuttle, phone pressed to his ear, already calling someone to complain about the injustice of it all. Greg and Susan followed without another word. Susan gave me a look that might have been pity or might have been disgust. I couldn't tell and didn't care. Tyler grabbed his and Emily's bags. Come on, Em. Let's get away from this psycho. Emily didn't move. Em, Tyler said again. I'll be there in a minute. He stared at her, then left. Jeff picked up his suitcase. Stopped in front of me. I'm sorry, he said quietly. For what? For not saying something yesterday. When they were. He shook his head. I should have said something. Yes, I said. You should have. He nodded and walked out. Emily was still standing there, crying quietly. Dad, she said. You should go. You'll miss your flight. I know. I need you to know I understand why you did this. Do you? Yes. We were awful. I was awful. I just followed everyone else and I didn't. I should have sat with you. Yesterday. In the lobby. I should have just sat down and talked to you. Something in my chest cracked a little. You should go. I said again, more gently. Can I call you? When I get home. Of course. She hugged me. Quick and hard. And then grabbed her bag and ran for the shuttle. Linda was the last one standing there. The lobby was quiet now except for the sound of the shuttle loading luggage outside. Through the windows, I could see my family climbing in. Marcus was still on his phone. Greg was gesticulating. Tyler was shaking his head. Emily was looking back at the hotel. Linda and I stood 3 feet apart, and it felt like a canyon. This isn't you, she said finally. Maybe that was the problem. We can fix this. We can talk about it. When we get home. I won't be home, I said. I'll be at the cabin. The cabin? She said it like I'd announced I was moving to Mars. In Arizona. I'm going to spend some time there. For how long? I don't know. A while. You can't just. We're married, David. You can't just disappear. You said you didn't need me. I was angry. You were honest. I pulled out my phone and showed her the text I'd sent Alan. I'm filing for divorce on Monday. My lawyer is preparing the paperwork. Her face went white. You're joking. I'm not. Because of one fight. Because of 15 years of feeling like an ATM. Because I watched you laugh at Marcus when he mocked me. Because you ordered the most expensive thing on the menu and didn't ask. Because you took a family photo without me and acted like I was being unreasonable for noticing. I have security footage, I said. From yesterday. All 6 of you walking past me in the lobby. Not one of you looked back. She stared at me. Robert can send you a copy if you'd like, I continued. For your lawyer. I have the confirmation emails showing I paid for everything. I have the prenup protecting the cabin. I have documentation of every financial transaction for the last 15 years. This is about money? This is about respect. The shuttle driver honked. Linda glanced back, then looked at me again. I'm calling my lawyer. Good. Give them Alan's contact information. He'll be expecting it. You're really doing this. I really am. She picked up her suitcase, the expensive one I'd bought her for Christmas 3 years ago, and walked toward the door. Stopped. Turned back. You're going to regret this. Maybe, I said. But I don't think so. She left. I watched the shuttle pull away, watched it disappear down the Palm Line Drive, and felt something in my chest loosen. Robert appeared at my elbow. You all right? I'm fine. That was brutal. It needed to be. He handed me a USB drive. Security footage. Yesterday afternoon. 4:15 to 6 p.m. Everything you need. I took it. Thank you. What now? Now I'm going to have breakfast. A very expensive breakfast. And then I'm going to sit on the beach and read a book. You're staying? I'm paid through Tuesday. Might as well enjoy it. He smiled. Good for you, Dave. We'll see. I went back to my room. My room, not our room. And stood on the balcony looking at the ocean. The sun was fully up now, burning off the morning haze. The beach was empty except for a few early walkers and a handful of seagulls. I pulled out my phone and texted Alan. Divorce filing Monday. We'll call with details. His reply. I'll have everything ready. Prenup should make this straightforward. I texted Emily. Safe flight. Call me when you land. She sent back a heart emoji. I looked at Linda's contact in my phone for a long moment, then blocked her number. Then I showered, changed into clean clothes, and went down to the restaurant. The same hostess from the first night greeted me. Table for 7? She asked automatically. Just one, I said. She showed me to a table by the window, the same table we'd sat at that first night. I ordered coffee, eggs Benedict, fresh fruit, and the most expensive item on the menu just because I could. The food was excellent. I ate slowly, watching the ocean, and realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd enjoyed a meal. After breakfast, I walked down to the beach. Found a chair. Opened the book I'd brought and hadn't had a chance to touch. My phone buzzed around noon. A text from a number I didn't recognize. This is Greg. Linda's hysterical. Marcus missed his connection. You need to fix this. I deleted it. Another buzz. This is Susan. I know you're hurt, but this is too far. Please call Linda. Deleted. At 1 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. The voicemail was Linda, calling from someone else's phone. David, please. We need to talk. You can't just. This is insane. Call me back. Please. I deleted the voicemail and blocked the number. At 3 p.m., Robert found me on the beach. Thought you should know. Your wife called the hotel. Tried to book a room under her name. And still fully booked. I told her the earliest availability is Thursday. What did she say? She said some things I won't repeat and hung up. I smiled. Thanks for the update. One more thing. She asked if I could talk sense into you. I told her I didn't think that was my job. Appreciate it. He nodded and walked back toward the hotel. I returned to my book. My phone buzzed again at 6. Emily landed safely. Tyler and I had a long talk on the plane. I think we might be done. I called her. Hey, Dad. You okay? Yeah. I mean, no. But I will be. She paused. He spent the whole flight complaining about you. About how you ruined everything. And I just kept thinking, you didn't ruin anything. We did. And he couldn't see it. I'm sorry. Don't be. I needed to hear it. I think I've needed to hear it for a while. We talked for 20 minutes. Really talked. She told me about her job, her garden, a trip she wanted to take to Portland. I told her about the cabin, about my plans to spend time there, about the hiking trail Sarah and I used to love. Can I visit? She asked. In a few weeks, maybe? Anytime, I said. Really? Anytime. I love you, Dad. I love you too, sweetheart. I hung up and sat there for a long time, watching the sun set over the ocean, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt like myself. I checked out Monday morning at 10, 2 hours before I had to. The room felt too big, too quiet, too much like evidence of something I was ready to leave behind. Robert was at the front desk when I came down with my single suitcase. Heading out. Time to go home, I said. Or what passes for it? He processed my checkout, a formality, since everything was already paid, and slid the receipt across the counter. Hell of a weekend, Dave. That it was. For what it's worth, he said. I've seen a lot of families come through here. Anniversaries, reunions, weddings. Most of them are happy. Some are just performing happiness. And a very few, are like yours. How's that? Treating someone like staff instead of family. I nodded. I let it happen. Maybe, but not anymore. We shook hands. His grip was firm, the handshake of someone who understood that some bridges needed to burn. If you're ever back in Hilton Head, he said, I'll know where to stay. I drove straight from the resort to the Charleston airport, returned the rental car, and caught a flight to Phoenix. First class. I'd upgraded myself at check-in because the middle seat in coach suddenly felt like a punishment I no longer deserved. The flight attendant brought warm nuts and whiskey I didn't drink, but appreciated having the option of. I landed in Phoenix at 7 p.m. local time and drove straight to Alan's office. He'd told me he'd wait, that this couldn't wait until morning, and when I arrived he already had papers spread across his conference table like a surgeon preparing for an operation. David, he said, standing. You look terrible. Long weekend. I gathered. He gestured to the papers. Divorce petition. Asset division. Custody. Well, there's no custody to speak of. Just Emily, and she's 39, so that's moot. Emily stays in the will. Already adjusted. She gets everything. Marcus is removed entirely, obviously. Obviously. He slid a document across the table. This is the fun part. Linda signed a prenup. The cabin is yours, no question. Your retirement accounts are separate property. You had those before the marriage. The Scottsdale house is joint property, but you contributed 83% of the down payment and all of the mortgage payments, so you're entitled to the lion's share of the equity. What does she get? Not much. Her car, which is in her name. Half the furniture, if she wants to fight about it. Maybe $20,000 from the house sale after we account for your contributions. She's going to fight. Let her. I have 15 years of bank statements showing you paid for everything. I have the prenup. I have, he paused. Do you really have security footage? I pulled out the USB drive Robert had given me. Yesterday afternoon. 6 people walking past me in a hotel lobby. Not one of them looked back. He took it, plugged it into his laptop, and watched in silence. When it finished, he sat back. That's damning. That's marriage. Not anymore. He slid a pen across the table. Sign here, here, and here. I'll file first thing tomorrow. I signed. My hand didn't shake. What are you going to do now, he asked. Drive to the cabin. Stay a while. How long is a while? I don't know. Until it feels right to come back. And if it never feels right, then I'll buy groceries in Sedona and learn to be comfortable with quiet. He walked me to the door. For what it's worth, Dave, I've been doing this for 30 years. I've seen a lot of divorces. Most of my clients are miserable. You seem relieved. I was going to say clear, but relieved works too. I drove north out of Phoenix as the sun set behind me, painting the desert in shades of orange and red. The highway was empty, the kind of empty you only get in Arizona on a Monday night when everyone else is home having dinner with families they actually liked. The cabin was 2 hours north of Sedona, tucked into the mountains where the red rocks gave way to pine trees and the air turned cool even in summer. Sarah and I had found the land 25 years ago, back when you could still afford property in Arizona if you were willing to drive a little and didn't mind fixing things yourself. We'd built the cabin together. Well, we'd hired contractors, but we'd done all the planning, all the design, all the debates about where the windows should face and whether the porch should wrap around or stop at the corner. Sarah had won most of those debates. She'd had better instincts about space and light and how a place should feel. I hadn't been back since she died. The driveway was overgrown. I had to get out twice to move fallen branches. The cabin itself looked small and sad in the headlights, windows dark, porch sagging slightly on one side. I unlocked the door. The key still worked, small miracle, and stepped inside. Dust everywhere. Furniture covered in sheets. The smell of disuse and time passing. I spent Monday night cleaning. Swept floors, wiped down surfaces, uncovered furniture that looked older than I remembered. Found a photo of Sarah in a drawer in the bedroom, tucked behind some old tax returns. She was standing on the porch, sunlight in her hair, smiling at something I'd said. I'd taken the picture maybe 15 years ago. On the back, in her handwriting, for when you need to remember who you are. I sat on the porch until midnight, holding that photo, watching stars I'd forgotten existed. Tuesday morning, I woke to silence. Not the silence of a hotel room or a house with people who didn't want to talk to you. Real silence. The kind that made space for thought. I made coffee, sat on the porch, watched the sunrise turn the rocks orange and gold. My phone rang at 8. Alan, papers are filed. She'll be served this afternoon. How long until it's final? Uncontested? 6 months. Contested? Could be a year. But with that security footage and the prenup, I don't think she'll contest. Her lawyer will tell her it's not worth it. Good. One more thing. Emily called me. Asked if she could have your number for the cabin. You gave it to her? I told her to ask you herself. She's calling you in 5 minutes. He hung up. 4 minutes later, my phone rang. Dad. Hey, sweetheart. Alan said you filed. This morning. How do you feel? Lighter. She laughed, a small, sad sound. I talked to Jeff last night. We agreed we're going to do better. Be better. If you'll let us. Of course. Can I come visit next month? Just me. No Tyler. No anyone else. Just you and me and that cabin you and Mom built. I'd like that. I love you, Dad. I love you too. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, coffee going cold in my cup. A week later, I met my neighbor, a woman named Claire, maybe 60, with gray hair and a long braid and the kind of face that suggested she'd lived an interesting life and had opinions about it. She was hiking past the cabin when she stopped to introduce herself. You're Sarah's husband, she said. I am. Was. She was a good woman. Brought me soup when I had the flu 5 years ago. I was sorry to hear she passed. Thank you. You planning to stay? For a while. There's a book club in town. Meets every other Thursday. You'd be welcome. I'll think about it. You do that. She left. I thought about it. Thursday came. I went to the book club. 3 weeks after that, Emily visited. We hiked the trails Sarah and I used to love. Cooked dinners together. Talked about her job, her breakup with Tyler, her plans to go back to school. On her last night, we sat on the porch watching the sunset. You seem different, she said. How so? Calmer. Like you're not waiting for something to go wrong. Maybe I'm not. I'm glad you did it, Dad. At the hotel. I know that sounds awful, but I'm glad you finally stood up for yourself. So am I. She left the next morning. Hugged me hard and promised to visit again soon. I believed her. The divorce was finalized in November. Linda didn't contest. Her lawyer had apparently watched the security footage and advised her to take the settlement and move on. She got her car, $22,000, and half the furniture. I got everything else. The last communication I had from her was a text from her lawyer's office. Mrs. Peterson requests that you not contact her again. I deleted it and didn't reply. On a Tuesday morning in December, I woke up to snow on the Red Rocks. Made coffee. Sat on the porch wrapped in a blanket Sarah had bought 20 years ago. My phone buzzed. Emily, coming to visit next month. Can't wait. I texted back a heart emoji, poured another cup of coffee, and watched the day begin. Somewhere south, in a house I no longer owned, Linda was waking up to a life without access to my credit card. Somewhere east, Marcus was probably still complaining about the injustice of canceled hotel rooms. And here, in a cabin built by two people who'd loved each other and understood what that meant, I was finally, mercifully, blissfully alone. I'd canceled 5 rooms. Turned out, I'd cleared space for something better. If you enjoyed this story, please click on one of our other stories showing on your screen. Please subscribe to the channel and like this video. It's free and helps the channel grow. Thanks for listening.